Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's show. I'm super excited to be joined here by Dane Dormio. A super interesting story from Dane. I'm really excited to dig into it. We've had martial arts before. We're going to go through some martial arts experience again and how it ties into your mind and body mastery. Also delving into questions about coaching, how to get your first clients, and how to improve yourself so that you can be a higher performer with better mentality, better mindset to achieve what you need to do. Dane, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tango, thanks. I'm really glad to be here and talk about some of my favorite topics.
Excellent. Me too. The first question is, what interested you into martial arts? Because I think that sounds like it was the nucleus for how everything began. And yeah, then how did that turn and transform into your interest into your whole entire mind body awakening and mastery?
That's easy. It was the Ninja Turtles. I basically wanted to be a Ninja Turtle when I was a kid. I basically started doing martial arts as a kid and never really stopped.
So yeah, great inspiration and role model to have. And then you started doing martial arts, and what was it about some experiences you had with martial arts which really changed you?
To put all of this into context, I grew up as a rational materialistic atheist in the Bible Belt with no concept of spiritual consciousness whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
At a certain point, I got into science and math and things like that. I went to a special school for math and science. I majored in math and physics in college. I went to a small private liberal arts school where you have to study some of everything. So the religion elective that I took was a class in Buddhism, which was fun for me at the time. There's a bunch of cool old stories, which I'd always enjoyed. I'd always gotten into the Greek myths, and I'd found and read a copy of the Panchatantra when I was growing up, and I enjoyed it. I tried to get into the Tao Te Ching when I was a teenager, but it didn't make any sense to me at the time. It just sounded like a bunch of gobbledygook. But I always enjoyed cool old stories like that. I enjoyed learning about all the cool old stories, including the one about Siddhartha Gautama sitting under the Bodhi tree and having the Satori, the instantaneous awakening experience, and arising as the Buddha, the awakened one. And it was a bunch of cool old stories and thought experiments like one hand clapping and your original face before your parents were born and things like that. And it didn't really mean a lot to me at the time. These two influences were always there from pretty early: math and science and the sort of like technical left brain aspects of my personality, and also martial arts. From a very young age, I was influenced by, in particular, external martial arts. And for those not familiar with that term, or with the distinction between internal and external martial arts, what most people think of as martial arts are what would be classified as external martial arts. The emphasis is on getting bigger, faster, stronger, overcoming strength with strength, jumping around, kicking high, doing backflips, and all those kinds of things, overpowering force with more force. And there's a lot of emphasis on physical fitness and calisthenics and that sort of thing, the external results you can achieve. Internal martial arts, the emphasis is on cultivating, first and foremost, a meditative state of awareness from which you can develop softness and smoothness and sensitivity and awareness by paying attention to breath and sensation and what's happening inside the body. And you can develop relaxation and soft power. My own mind-body mastery journey really started was after I graduated from college, moved to Southern California for graduate school in physics, and started looking for new martial arts schools. And I found a place that was called the Kung Fu Academy that it turns out taught internal martial arts, largely based in the Tai Chi Classics, which is a collection of writings. It's a couple hundred years old that outlines the principles of internal martial arts, the kind of universal principles of internal martial arts. And then after that, I branched out and did different styles. And the first 12 years, I did all different types of styles: Chinese, Japanese, Brazilian, Filipino, but they were all external styles. Mm-hmm. And when I first began practicing internal martial arts, and I started practicing this way, and it was within just a few months of beginning to practice this way, where one evening I was in my room practicing, as I often was, just moving slowly and relaxing and breathing and feeling the sensations and noticing what was happening inside my body. And all of a sudden, there was this moment when everything in the entire universe was completely different. And at the same time, nothing had changed at all. Everything was exactly the same. And the first thought that went to my head after this happened was, oh, so that's what that was. That's what they were talking about in those old stories. That just happened. And I realized this experience that people spend years and decades and lifetimes even striving after and seeking, and that I didn't even really believe in, had just fallen out of the sky and landed in my lap. Like, oh, where'd
Crazy.
that come from? Pretty much up to this point in my life, I lived entirely up here. For those who are just listening, the left hemisphere of my brain, all completely in my head and a little to one side, as Sir Ken Robinson says. And this was the first time in my life where I started to inhabit all of this. I started to actually experience and fully experience and inhabit my entire mind body energy system, and realize that there was such a thing as spiritual consciousness and somatic awareness. And the best way I can describe this is, it's like right now, Tango, in your peripheral vision, can you see your nose? Can you see it there? If you look, you like see the faint outline.
Now that you
Like,
mention it, I realize I can see it.
oh yeah. Okay. So now that I mentioned it, now that it's pointed out, you notice it and you realize, oh, actually you can see it, and it actually was there all along. Right? At first, no, I can't see that. Oh wait, yeah, I can. Oh, it's always been there. You've been seeing it all along. You just didn't realize you were seeing it. That's what it was like. So this is what I consider to be the beginning of my own personal mind body mastery journey, and at least the internal path. This was when I discovered the internal path of mind body mastery, which is all about regulating body, breath, and mind together to manage state moment to moment and to induce flow states at will.
Awesome. And when did you actually decide to start coaching and for this to become like a serious core part of who you are?
Much, much, much later. And I'll actually speak to that by, there's actually quite a bit that happened between then and then. And I want to clarify by saying that I describe this experience as a spiritual awakening, which is actually a pretty specific term in transpersonal psychology. But there's a term that it often gets associated with, which is enlightenment or enlightened. And this is a term that is not clearly defined, and it means way different things to different people. I want to clarify about this, that the spiritual awakening was only the beginning of my problems. I did not by any chance become some kind of perfect enlightened transcendent master at that point. What actually happened following on that was I ended up dropping out of graduate school, moving to Houston to go into the real estate business with an old college buddy. We ended up getting involved with a scam artist mortgage broker in the months leading up to this little thing you might have heard of called the subprime mortgage crisis.
Best time to be in the real estate market for sure.
Each of us acquired over $1 million in mortgage debt and a handful of properties that were all acquired and foreclosed within 9 months. And I walked away with over 100,000 in unsecured debt on my credit record. I ended up moving back to San Diego, being homeless, living out of a backpack for a year, then living out of an RV for 5 years. And after that, different stuff happened. I had different kinds of jobs, ended up living overseas, coming back, moving around in different places. Long story short, this experience was really only the beginning of my problems in life, not the end of them. But it was the beginning of a certain type of awareness for me that revealed for me the internal path of mind body master. And I say revealed because the work that I do now, you asked about when I started coaching, and the work that I do now I've been led to it through a series of spiritual awakening experiences, actually, where the universe has revealed my path to me. And this was the first one. It was a couple years after this, actually, when I was in the real estate business in Houston. One of my colleagues gave me a copy of the very first audiobook edition of GTD. Getting Things Done is the name of a book and a whole body of work by a guy named David Allen. It's basically the modern day Bible of personal organization and productivity. And the big main idea from that book is, if you want to function effectively in the modern information age, especially as a knowledge worker, or even just as a modern day digital citizen, you've got to have a trusted system outside your head for keeping track of things, so you don't have to keep everything in your head, so the brain can be used for having ideas instead of holding on to them. And it's that trusted system, what I call the distributed cognition ecosystem, which is the network of all the different tools and apps and processes and habits and things that we all naturally use to support our own thought and creative and productive process. If you have a trusted system, you're brain could be free for having ideas instead of holding on to them, because the brain sucks for holding on to ideas. It, like, short-term memory holds 3 to 7 bits of information at a time. And if you have ever tried to, or if you know someone who uses their brain as a calendar, it sucks as a calendar. Or what about using your brain as an address book? It sucks as an address book. And what a lot of people do, use your brain as a to-do list. It sucks as a to-do list, as a project manager. But if you have these tools, if you use these tools effectively to support the natural innate task manager and project manager and address book and calendar functionalities inside your brain, if you do that effectively, if you develop the skill set of doing that, the skill set of executive functioning, or what I call the fine art of deciding what to do and then doing it, and you use tools to support that effectively, it's like the difference between how much mental math can you do just in your head with no assistance whatsoever, versus with the assistance, or you can use your fingers, versus with the assistance of just a pencil and paper, versus with the assistance of a calculator or a spreadsheet. The tool-assisted brain is orders of magnitude more capable than the unassisted human brain. And that's why there's a so-called epidemic these days of ADD, ADHD, things like this. You know, we're all on the spectrum somewhere, right? But it doesn't matter, because, and I'm using this term loosely, a quote-unquote, a defective brain assisted by tools can run circles around a perfect brain on its own. So your capability to conceive of and execute ideas, what's known as, air quotes again, manifestation, is not limited to your innate intellectual ability, your onboard computing power. It's because you can use tools to assist that. And if you do that effectively, this is why people who have big brains and are like innately pretty smart, this is actually a disadvantage when it comes to this. You develop the habit of using it for everything. And that actually is a severe limitation. It's like when I was in 7th or 8th grade, I was in junior high, and I took this advanced high school algebra class, and the teacher would show us an example problem, and it would be pretty simple. And she would go, "These are the steps you need to do to solve this problem." And I would go, "Oh, I don't need to do those steps. I can just look at it and see the answer." But then later, I'd see a more complicated problem, like on a test, and then I can't just look at it and see the answer. It's pretty important to know and be able to apply the steps. It's better if you don't get in the habit of trying to use your brain for everything, because no matter how powerful your brain is, that's going to be your biggest bottleneck if you try to use it for all of your systems. So this is the external path of mind-body mastery, having to do with information and action management. The first time I listened to that audiobook version of Getting Things Done, that was what triggered the second major spiritual awakening of my life. And the best way I can think of to describe this is, it was like as if my brain is a computer, and I just defragged, reformatted the whole hard drive, installed a new and upgraded operating system. And it changed my fundamental way of thinking on a granular cognitive level, my internal process of filtering, processing information, and making action decisions. Because prior to this point, I thought that I knew how to use my brain properly. And this is a parallel between these two experiences. The first experience that I mentioned, I thought I knew how to use my body. I was really fit. I've been doing martial arts since I was 10 years old. I could do all kinds of tricks and stunts and things. But deep down, I really had no idea how to actually control my body. When I had the first awakening experience that I mentioned, that was when I realized I had no idea how to actually use my body. And I started to really learn how by actually paying attention and developing sensitivity and awareness and efficiency of movement. And the second experience, I thought I knew how to use my brain. I knew I was pretty smart. Ever since I was a kid, people always said, "Oh yeah, Dane, he's smart. He's a walking dictionary. He's a walking encyclopedia." I knew this. I'd gone to graduate school, and I had a degree in math and physics, and I thought I knew how to use my brain, but I really had no idea how to actually use my brain properly for envisioning and executing ideas.
This is such a valuable concept and idea to really wrap your head around, this idea of the tool-assisted human and brain. And I think one quote that comes to mind is Steve Jobs, who said essentially about computers that they're bicycles for the mind. So it's really a way of using leverage to just get much further than you would be able to do on your own. And it's super important to lean on these tools, but also to be aware of picking the right tool for the job. So it's not, if what you have is a chisel, you shouldn't be using it as a hammer for a nail, right? So it's about picking the right tools. And that's why leaning on computers, leaning on certain software, whether it's something to help you with accounting or something to help you with coaching, such as Pensight, which covers all of the different functionality you need to do. You don't need to worry about payments. You don't need to worry about building a website. You can lean on tools like Pensight, and for other situations, lean on other tools, which will be beneficial. And it's all about picking the right tool and then leveraging your own mind, because you can't be amazing at everything. Like, you can be great at certain things. You might be an incredible coach for mindset or martial arts or maths or whatever it may be, but it makes sense to leverage other things around you so that you can travel further. I really like that point.
Well, you bring up a lot of really good points relating to tools and using the right tool for the job, which I actually think this is a really rich vein to mine, because when it comes to selecting tools, the first thing is tool selection, selecting the right tool for the, what I deal in is personal systems and cognitive tools. So GTD actually says, David Allen says in GTD that the system, it's a conceptual system, it's tool agnostic, tool independent. You can implement it on whatever medium or platform is right for you. It can be digital, it can be on paper, it can be whatever works for you and your brain. But and so when it comes to those conceptual tools, there's certain conceptual functions, which basically comes down to list management, making and keeping track of lists. And there are different types of specialized digital tools like action managers, habit managers, project tools, capture tools, calendars. And there's a lot to be said for using the right tool for the right job. For example, one thing, a pitfall people run into is using their calendar as their to-do list. It doesn't, if you try to do that, it doesn't work as a calendar or a to-do list. It's like using a chisel to hammer in a nail. And then, but there are also, these are like the basic cognitive assistance type of tools. But when it comes to specialized tools for business functions, say a coaching platform, there's a balance. And this balance is one of the most important things to understand when it comes to this stuff, because people tend to retreat to one particular camp, which is, if I'm going to use tools effectively, I have to become a total tech nerd. And so I'm just going to not bother with any of it and find the simplest possible solution, or try to delegate or outsource it. And the reason that's such a big pitfall is that you can't delegate or outsource your own internal thought process. You can't delegate or outsource personal organization and productivity. You can't delegate or outsource executive function, because it's an internal, it's first and foremost an internal skill set. It's how you arrange the files in your own internal hard drive, and the apps and the executables that you have running on your own wet hardware. So there are fundamental cognitive skills to be learned when it comes to executive functioning. And this by itself is a really crucial realization. I didn't even realize there was such a thing, let alone that it was something you could develop, because this is not something that we're taught in schools. If you think about it, it's just assumed in schools. If you have good executive functioning skills, you'll do great. If you don't, sucks to be you. That's what we got a ranking scale for. And also, most of us do not learn these skills at home, because if we're honest, I certainly came from a childhood home that was extremely disorganized and dysfunctional, and I didn't learn anything about project planning and implementation and execution and executive functioning in my household environment. So realizing that people think, oh, some people are organized and some people aren't, and I'm just one of the ones who isn't. Some people are, and I'm not one of them. But it's a skill that anyone can learn and develop. It makes your life easier and better. It's not a matter of using the right tool. You can't automate it. You can't pick up a tool, a really simple and a really complex one like Pensight, in terms of its design, and say, oh, just let this do everything for me. You have to develop certain proficiency. But that doesn't mean you have to become a total tech nerd and spend all day, every day buried in systems and tweaking everything. You have to learn enough to be efficient and effective. And if you're going to delegate or outsource something, you have to learn to do that thing well enough that you can manage it effectively. That's the difference between delegating and abdicating. And when it comes to systems, you have to get good enough at using the system that it becomes easy for you, so that, like, when you first start using something, it might seem like a lot, like, oh, I got to learn this and this. But like when you first learn to drive, it seemed like a lot of things. But when you do it enough, it's one thing. So instead of, I got to check the brakes and the shift and the steering and the mirrors and I'm driving and talking and putting on makeup and eating. It's just one thing. It becomes easy. You have to learn enough to be efficient and effective, and have it be a time savings rather than a time sink. But then once you do that, it's like investing in your own productivity. You become 5x or 10x or whatever x more effective and more productive once you get over the learning curve.
Yeah, again, it's super, super valuable and interesting points there. To continue our analogy with a chisel and a nail and a hammer, like, sure, like a hammer is better than a nail, but if you're like twisting a hammer on top of the nail and thinking that's going to push it down, no, that's not how you use a hammer. That's how you use a screwdriver, right? So it's about also having the executive function of knowing how to use the tools, having the kind of systems and mental models in place to actually optimize and get what your actual end goal, which is a nail inside whatever it is.
Yeah,
So
yeah. That's a good analogy.
Awesome. This is super, super interesting stuff about conceptual models, using tools in the right way, and also like figuring out the switching cost that's in place. So there is a learning curve, and sometimes those learning curves are super steep. Sometimes they're easy. Learning how to use a hammer is easy. Same as pen size, I would like to say. But in terms of actually getting there, once you have that learning curve done, then after you kind of the expense of switching tools and learning how to use something can then lead to you being much more effective with your time and placement. And I guess that's one of the kind of things you focus on in your mind body mastery. And related to that, maybe you can tell us more about the 1 to 10 mind body mastery scale.
There is a scale, but I actually think it's helpful to start at the top level with the 4 stages, because there really are 4 stages of mind body mastery. And these 4 stages are one of the most important and helpful things to understand at first, because, and this kind of relates to using the right tool for the right job, actually. There are 4 stages, and it's important, first of all, to recognize which stage you're at so you can use the appropriate tactics and strategies and techniques to get from where you are to the next stage, because what will get you from one stage to the next stage is what has to be built upon to get you to the following stage. For example, the first stage is misery. And this actually came from a term that a client of mine used, that she, after I was working with her for a while, she described where she had been living previously. She said she was living in the pit of misery that she created for herself through her own habits, her thought habits, her physical habits, her health habits, her work habits, her lifestyle choices that she'd made that had created a lot of friction and unhappiness for herself. And I want to clarify that these stages don't correspond necessarily to external success, because this client was fully functional in the usual sense of the word and successful. She had a healthy daughter, and she works as an attorney and had a good income and lifestyle and a house and everything. But she had created a lot of misery for herself just in how she was living her life. And she didn't realize this until after she started doing some things differently, how much misery she had been creating for herself. And so she said, I was living in the pit of misery, and I feel like I'm finally crawling out of it. So that's the first stage, misery. It's for whatever reason having to do with issues or emotional issues or relationship issues or circumstances you've created in your life that create chronic misery of one form or another. If you are here, if you're in the pit of misery, the tactics have to do with basic self-care. Things like regular high-quality meals, regular high-quality sleep, regular high-quality movement. Taking care of your basic needs. When you start to take care of those basic needs, then you move yourself into the maintenance range, which is stage 2, which is where you're just treading water. You're not necessarily miserable. You're kind of baseline. You're not super happy. You're not super miserable. You're maintaining your life. You're not really making progress, but at least you're not miserable anymore. You've got consistent healthcare, self-care practices. There's nothing terribly wrong with your sleep, your diet. You're getting some kind of gentle movement and exercise. And also there's the internal and the external aspects. The internal aspects are self-care things. The external aspects are things like writing down your thoughts and keeping track of things that you need to take care of, responsibilities, some kind of system for information and action management, whether it's just writing down everything on your mind each day or some paper folders or something like that. And then when you've stabilized the situation, then to move from maintenance into stage 3, which is momentum, where you're making progress, you're moving forward in things. You're not just stagnant treading water, but you're actually growing and moving forward in life. This is where you need to do things like more intense exercise. If you're doing just gentle exercise before, you can do more intense exercise, or more regular. If you're exercising once a week, you can exercise 3 times a week. Or if you're doing gentle exercise 3 times a week, you can do gentle exercise 6 or 7 times a week. And also have some kind of dedicated mind-body practice, something ideally a complete mind-body practice, which involves all 3 regulations of body regulation, breath regulation, mind regulation. So things like exercise, breath work, meditation, yoga, qigong, tai chi, and many other things, some kind of actual mind-body practice. On the inner path and on the outer path, some kind of distributed cognition ecosystem, particularly using tools for project and action management, for calendars, for things that you need to use tools for. And then going from stage 3 momentum to stage 4 mastery is about tweaking and optimizing. So you get your diet really dialed in with the right supplements, nootropics. You get your sleep really dialed in with tuning into your chronotype and biorhythm, and setting basically all the sleep hygiene habits. The external path, you have some kind of optimized life operating system that's complete and current, and that enables you to manage and keep current all of your ongoing responsibilities and projects. So those 4 stages are about realizing, then upgrading, then optimizing. And what there's a strong tendency to do is want to jump ahead to the most advanced thing. So somebody who's in the misery or the maintenance range might go, oh yeah, I'm going to start doing the breath work and cold showers and sexual cultivation and nootropics, and like all of that stuff is not going to make a difference if you don't have just your basic sleep, diet, movement habits. If you don't have a way to capture and organize your thoughts. It's important to recognize what stage you're at, use the appropriate strategies, tactics at that stage for long enough to actually shift your baseline to where your baseline goes from being miserable to where your baseline goes to being neutral, to where your baseline goes to being positive, to where your baseline goes to being optimal. It's a different quality of life going at each stage. When you're going from misery to maintenance, your whole quality of life changes. Going from maintenance to momentum, your whole quality of life changes. But going from momentum to mastery, it's like a 10 times greater change, a whole different order of magnitude of change, the quality of life that you experience with no trade-offs. It's not like you have to sacrifice something to get there. It's when you get everything in your life really working for you instead of against you. The quality of life you experience is something that, frankly, a lot of people can't even imagine it and have a hard time even believing there is such a thing if they've never experienced it. Is that really even possible? Yes, it actually is. But you have to apply the appropriate strategies at each stage for long enough to shift your center of mass, so to speak, to shift your baseline experience of life, and then start applying the steps, the strategies to get to the next stage.
Awesome. Yeah, that definitely sounds heavenly, at the next level of kind of existence and something to strive for and to achieve. And we mentioned timing or ordering of things, not putting the cart before the horse. So realizing which stage you're at and then approaching it the right way to move on to the next level. And then I think, so this was a great answer to the question of what are the 4 stages of mind body mastery. And then I guess that kind of maps to this 1 to 10 rating scale, which is a more quantified way of moving up through the stages. A super, super interesting way to look at this and to approach life in these 4 levels. I want to go back to the story you mentioned about this attorney. So one of your success stories. And if you can tell us more about this woman who was in the pit of misery, and how did you help her transform and come to you? And actually, even before that, how did you find her? Or how did she find you? How did you get her as a client and interest her in your ability to help her optimize her life?
I'll back up even 1 stage before that in terms of how I got started in coaching. I did a lot of different things, worked in multiple different industries: education, fitness, hospitality, event organizing. But everything I did was always to get to the next thing, until I finally made the decision to pursue coaching as a career, which was natural evolution, because I was always helping and teaching what I was learning and helping people. And when it came to the organization principles and methodologies and executive functioning skills, I would find that, like, when I would start working with somebody new, or if I would start living with somebody, I would always sit down with them and listen to the audiobook with them and go through the process with them and help them process and organize all their stuff, just because it made it so much easier for us to interface and relate and to have an effective working relationship. And so I listened to that book dozens of times, double digits. I've lost track of how many times I've listened to it over the years, and gone through the process myself and with others. And I was always teaching martial arts too. Like for every martial art I learned, I would start teaching it to somebody else, whoever I could, as soon as I was able. That was part of my learning process. When it was about 5 years ago that I made the decision to pursue coaching as a career, this is when I started to feel like I'm finally doing what I'm always going to be doing. This isn't just to get to the next thing or a stepping stone. This is what I'm here for. Better late than never. Right around the time I made that decision, I was also invited to teach martial arts to kids in Nepal with a NGO that was started to combat sex trafficking and slavery by teaching self-defense and martial arts to kids, which was basically an opportunity I couldn't pass up. And I ended up living there for 8 months, as long as my tourist visa would let me stay in the country. And a large part of the time when I was very first starting my coaching business, all I had was part of my time available, basically no income, and a Facebook account and a somewhat reliable internet connection. Also a 12-hour time zone difference from where all of the other English-speaking people were. So that was how I started. And I don't suggest that anybody do what I did really, which is struggle and experiment and trial and error and figure it out yourself for a long time, years, frankly. And when you see all those like ads, oh, I started coaching and made $90 bajillion within 37 days. It doesn't help to compare your journey to anyone else's. Trust me, I was struggling to start my coaching business for 4 years, and I was at a workshop, and I felt self-conscious about admitting this. And I heard somebody say, "Oh yeah, I've been struggling to start my coaching business for 10 years." And I'm like, "Oh really?" Well, I don't feel so bad now. The best thing is if you can get with a community, get with a mentors, like actually get help from people. That's by far the fastest way. But we all do what we can with what we have from where we are. So whatever your circumstances are, you do what you can. And the first thing I realized is, okay, if I'm going to have coaching class, I'm going to need to talk to people. So I need to get good at talking to people. I need to get good at finding people to talk to. And at first, I set myself a goal of, I'm going to just find 100 people to talk to, just have conversations with and help them any way I can. And at first, I'm going to find people to talk to. And I would go on Facebook and I'd contact my own friends. And at first, it was hard. But by the time I'd checked off that 100th conversation, it was easy. I was like, okay, I know I can have I'll never run out of people to talk to. I can always get people to talk to. That part's easy now. And then I realized, okay, I've talked to 100 people, but I haven't signed up anybody for anything. So now I've got to get good at signing people up and learn how to do that. And then I realized, okay, I'm going to have to get good at creating content that's going to make people want to come to me. And at first it was like, how am I going to come up with ideas to write about? And then, how am I going to write about this? And how am I going to post consistently? I did it enough. I got good at it. And now it's like, I've got way more ideas than I can ever write about. I did enough until it became easy, solving one problem at a time. And if you put it all together, if you can create content that gets people to come to you, and you can figure out how to meet new people and get new people into your network, and then have a conversation that enrolls them in something. And that's a coaching business right there. And there's lots of different ways to do that and all kinds of fancy systems and models and everything. But that's essentially what it is. And you figure out your own way to do those things, and that's your coaching business. So I know what you really asked about was this one particular client. This client was actually an old high school classmate, someone I had known and been connected to for a long time. But the reason that she reached out to me was because of posting on Facebook. Yeah. So as far as how I helped her, well, so this is essentially what I do with people, Tango. I struggled to learn how to communicate this, how to communicate what you do how to communicate the value of what you do to the people that can use your help in a way that will move them to take action. That's another one of those things you got to figure out. And I realized simpler is better. I take somebody and I help them get all their shit entirely together in 3 months, meaning completely get everything in their life organized, get a personal system designed and up to speed and operating to keep them on track, get bits and personal rituals dialed in, get their lifestyle dialed in, all in the space of 3 months. And it's a very tall order, but there's a system and a process for doing it. So essentially, most people have the same kind of root issues: too much stress, lack of energy, lack of focus. I can't focus on what I need to do. I don't have enough energy to do it anyway, and I'm under too much stress to worry about it. And all of these are addressed by the same systematic process of get clear and complete and current on all your responsibilities. Capture, corral all your stuff, your physical space, your digital space, everything that you're responsible for, so that you can manage it efficiently and effectively, and design the framework of personal habits or personal rituals, design the lifestyle that is going to create consistent progress towards the ultimate outcome that you envision for your life. So really, it's there's actually 4 steps: visioneering, getting clear on the big picture; strategizing, reverse engineering backwards in time to develop a plan; actioneering, putting the systems in place to ensure that you stay on track; and belief change, which is identifying and replacing any limiting beliefs that may be in the way. Going through those 4 stages, collecting everything. And when I say, I know already some people are listening, oh, I'm going to organize all my stuff in 3 months. Well, maybe not. It depends on how much stuff you have to organize and at what level, because there's horizontal and vertical thinking. If you say, like, you got to organize the garage. If you have a trusted system that you can put everything in, then for that responsibility to be taken care of, you don't have to go out there and organize your whole garage. You just have to capture or organize garage in your system, and then boom, it's captured, it's accounted for. It's not done, but it's accounted for. And so that part of your brain that's hanging on to that's generating anxiety because of this incomplete open loop, now, that's taken care of. And you free up the mental RAM, you free up the creative space and energy, and you can schedule that, put it on your calendar when it makes sense in relation to all of your other priorities. And that's what I mean by getting everything collected and captured and accounted for. It doesn't mean getting everything done. It means getting everything into a system where you can feel okay with it, and you can wake up each day clear on what you intend to do that day, clear on how it aligns with your highest values and priorities and vision, having already paved the way to wake up and go, what am I doing today? Okay, it's clearly defined, boom, it's done, instead of waking up, looking at your whole pile of stuff and going, what am I going to do today? And then picking something to do, but having the little voice nagging in the back of your head going, yeah, but is this really what I should be working on right now? I don't know. Let me scan my whole inventory of things and see if there's maybe something more important or urgent for me to be doing right now. No, it's just, this is what I'm doing, it's done, and everything is on track, and now I can go kick back and have a beer or whatever you want to do after it's done, because you feel not that everything is done, but you are okay with the state that everything is in right now.
Super interesting. There's a psychological effect that I thought was worth mentioning called I don't know how to pronounce it, but Zeigarnik effect. So it occurs when an activity that has been interrupted may be more readily recalled. And so it basically postulates that people remember unfinished or interrupted tasks better than completed tasks. And that is essentially what you're mentioning, this kind of thing in the back of your mind that you've got something to do until you can finish it in some way. And that finishing can be just to capture it, keep it safe. So you can then release it from your RAM or release it from your short-term memory, and then really focus on what you need to do next. So
yes, because if those, I haven't heard of that effect, but it is really fascinating, because those incompletes, any kind of incomplete responsibilities, what's called an open loop, is anything that you have that you've become aware of, that you feel any level of responsibility to do anything with, for, about. And if you see something that you need to do something with, or for, about, or to, or whatever, your brain goes, I need to do that. But it doesn't go into long-term memory. It stays in an open loop in short-term memory. Just like when you're remembering the grocery list going to the store as a kid, it goes on to, I need to do this thing, I need to do this thing, I need to do this thing, I need to do this thing. And that part of your brain, there is no future or past. It needs to be done right now. And the more of those you have open, the more it's like having, it eats up mental RAM, and you have 50, it's like having 50 browser tabs open on your computer. It slows down everything. It monopolizes your mental RAM, which is very detrimental to your life overall, because mental RAM or short-term memory draws on the same mental energy reserves used by critical thinking, decision-making, empathy, and willpower. So the more energy you use for any one of these things, the less available you have available for any of the others. So when you have a bunch of open loops, incompletes in your mind, instead of in a trusted system where your mind treats them as closed loops, it's eating up your mental RAM. And just like how background process is running on your computer, you don't see it, you don't know it's running, but like everything moves really slowly. You're not consciously aware of it, but it's eating up your system resources. And then when you close those loops, when you clear the cache, then all of a sudden you have all this mental energy that you freed up now available for creativity, for willpower, for empathy, for decision making, critical thinking. So identifying and capturing those open loops, getting them off your mind, is one of, if not the single most crucial thing you can do to make your ability to do everything else that much more effective.
Incredible. I think I speak for everyone listening when now I can very easily say that it's abundantly clear how having such a system for your mental state and understanding how you're approaching things in terms of your whole life and executive control of things, how valuable that is. And thank you for sharing all of this content. It's been so fascinating and informational. So people can find you, of course, at Pensite, at pensite.com/x/Dane Dormio. Is there anywhere else people can find you, connect with you? And do you maybe have some treats that you could offer our listeners?
Well, I am pretty sure I'm the only Dane Dormio in the world. So I'm easy to find on Facebook and LinkedIn if you would like to connect that way. You can also go to mindbodymastery.academy to download the Mindbody Mastery Roadmap, which actually outlines those 4 stages of Mindbody Mastery: misery to maintenance to momentum to mastery. It outlines the stages and the strategies at each stage. You can pick that up there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dane. It's been an absolute pleasure, and look forward to speaking to you soon again.
Thanks a bunch, Tango. I've had a lot of fun.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll be releasing new ones every Wednesday. Make sure to subscribe and rate us 5 stars on your favorite podcast platform to give other people the chance to discover us too.